Welcome to Sales Rewritten, the #1 podcast for sellers. No buzzwords, no fakery, it's just straight talk about what really works in modern sales. My name is Alex Wood, I'm your host, and every week I sit down with people who are living the highs and lows of this profession. Today's guest is Angela Lindberg, a trained business psychologist and experienced HR SaaS professional. She's built her career at the intersection between psychology and sales, helping shape organizations and their policies and close enterprise deals whilst championing the importance of mental health in the workplace. Let's get into it. Welcome.
Thank you. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Our fourth American on our podcast.
Oh my
now.
goodness,
Out
you're
of
on a
8
roll.
guests, we're on a real.
It's contagious.
We're building a roster. But I'll start as I always have on our podcast so far, which is a question about when people ask you what you do for a living, Angela, how do you typically describe it?
Yeah, well, I'm a business psychologist by training, but I build mentally health workplaces. The primary engine through which I do that is really the intersection of coaching and therapy connected with science and technology. So that allows us to scale things and measure things much more effectively than we traditionally could in the consulting world that I used to work in, and where I came from.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Where you came from is one of those perhaps non-linear paths into a sales role.
Like most sales, the roles.
But it is. The amount of guests we've had so far who've described something similar, maybe not psychology and perhaps not health, but they've traversed, an interesting career path to get to where you are today.
Yeah, I had I'll never forget the recruiter's message to me. I was working in consulting, and the first line of it said, "You're probably wondering why I'm reaching out to you for a sales role." And he was absolutely right. I thought to myself, why are you reaching out to me for a sales role? But it was with a company that was really doing a lot of the work that I was doing in consulting, but leveraging technology and science to scale it. And I thought, wow, they're solving so many of the problems that I'm trying to solve, but way more effectively, right? And so I knew I needed to be part of technology in some sort of way because it was really taking off. And the fact that we could measure the impact of what we were doing was really important to me.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was my first leap into sales. I took a huge risk, and they were taking a risk on me too. I was a bit of a guinea pig in their world, but had a tremendous amount of success.
But do you find that is the perfect example really of why sales as a profession is an opportunity and a job that almost anyone could learn to do?
I think we all have the capacity to learn pretty much anything. Some of it will come more naturally than others. The reason I had so much success, I attribute to two things. One, amazing coaching and mentorship from people above me and people below me and people who I considered my peers. And then the second was really my background and expertise. So I could have those sophisticated conversations with leaders about why this mattered and the measurement behind it. So in one way, I was kind of light years ahead of other people because I understood the science and rigor behind what we were doing. And I was selling to people I went to graduate school with. But on the other token, I had never been in Salesforce before, right? I had never negotiated a contract. So I leaned very, very heavily on those around me. And that is everyone from BDRs to, my peers to my leaders.
Tell us a bit about, your backstory and where you started your sort of career. And if it wasn't sales, what were you doing in some of your earlier roles?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which if anybody knows where that is, it's the Midwest, and we're known for being incredibly nice and warm and welcoming. It's also terribly cold there. So I grew up there in a very amazing household. I'm the middle of 5. So we're all very, very close, and relationships are a very big deal to us, and that has always been at the forefront of things. As I got older, I learned a lot more about the importance of how people think and how we get along, and that's what really led me to psychology. I first started in chemical and mental health, believe it or not, and worked in that field for about 4 years before I realized that was not quite for me. I really need 1 + 1 = 2. I needed to see the impact of all the work that I was doing, and so often that's not something you get in that world. You can put all of this work in, and unfortunately, these children are going back to environments that are just not conducive for them to be healthy, which is really unfortunate. So I bless and thank the people who work in those fields. I just knew it wasn't for me. It was really something that was tugging at my heartstrings in a way that wasn't helpful for me. But I love psychology and I love learning how people think. And so I wanted to lean into that in a different way. And I think the universe is working for us when we listen to it. And it was the perfect timing. I had been made redundant from my job at the ripe age of 21, which was terrifying back then. But right about then, I was looking into, all right, I know this isn't the field for me. What do I do? And I knew I wanted to get my master's. I wanted to continue my education. And I kind of fell into IO psychology. It found me. There was a program in Chicago. It was one of the only schools that was offering a degree of that type because it's a relatively new field. And my brother lived there, my oldest brother. So it was kind of a perfect opportunity for me. So I packed up my things and moved to Chicago. Got my master's in IO psychology, which is industrial organizational psychology. I always just say it's a bunch of big words smashed together. And then was working all throughout my graduate career. So finished the master's program, went on to the PhD program, and that was more business psychology related. But that is how do people think in the workplace?
Right.
How do we make them work more effectively so we can get the most out of our psychological capital, which is typically your biggest line item, right? So we put so much emphasis on the things like the tech, the digital side, and the strategy.
Yeah.
What about the people, right? And so that was a really perfect niche for me, and I don't have to bill insurance for it, right? So yeah, it was a natural progression into business psychology.
And I appreciate the sort of explanation around IO psychology because that there is a distinction, you were just telling us before we kick things off, between that of business psychology and also clinical. And that's an important one to probably relay to listeners as well, is there is that difference.
Clinicians are much more focused on diagnosis and treatment, right? IO psychology really leans on things from the positive psychology concepts, which is a relatively new field. I mean, it's only been around for 20, 30 years. So we're still finally catching up with like a lot of what science knows. It reminds me of when doctors used to still smoke in their offices, right? Like it took us a while to catch up with that. I do the same thing, diagnosing, treating, but with your business and your people. So how do we look at things like productivity, retention, and engagement and use our people to drive those types of things? Ultimately, what we're looking for is performance of the business, and how you get there is your people as the vehicle.
It's people, fundamentally, who are at the core of so much of what a business does and the way it grows, the way it operates, and even those non-tangible things of a culture that is created within an organization. That is all to do ultimately with who you bring in, who you hire, those behaviors that you reward and encourage. So I just want to ask, having worked across small businesses, having worked across healthcare to an extent, now high growth SaaS as well, what have maybe some of those earlier roles taught you?
I prefer smaller environments, even school. I didn't go to a big, large school. I needed something small. That learning environment is helpful for me. And I prefer to work in environments where I can have and see the impact. So this kind of relates to my first job in that learning. And I think in a startup, it's not just about growing the business, right? It's also about making the processes more efficient. I use this analogy of often you're moving so fast in a startup, you're hacking your way through a jungle. And then you kind of have to turn around and go, oh my God, there's all this mess behind me. We need to pick that up and start to make sense of it, right? And so my job isn't just selling and growing the business. It's also how to create a more effective process around this as we continue to grow. So things like, how do we build a legal front door for when we have, 40 NDAs versus just 4 that are much more manageable? And so that's where startups became an exciting opportunity for me to contribute, not just commercially to the role, but also about growing and nurturing the business into its new phase, and especially with the people too. So I'm a very relational seller, and being able to see and celebrate the impact of that with others around me, because selling as a team sport is huge.
That's integral to the environment that you work best in.
And there's a ton of research around this too. I mean, meaning and purpose in your work is huge, right? People will forgo roughly 30% of their lifetime earnings to do work with meaning and purpose.
Wow.
And so finding that early on was, I think, so fortunate for me.
So take us to that time the recruiter reached out and sort of positioned a sales role. When was that, and what was this opportunity that was being dangled in front of you? Yeah,
I could tell you the exact coffee shop I was sitting in Lincoln Park. I remember getting the message. I had just left a consulting meeting. I was working for a small boutique consultancy. Was in the middle of kind of finishing my PhD, so I was in a great place to continue working full time, but experiment with something new. And the consultancy I was with treated me very well, and I grew and nurtured a lot of myself in that role. But I hit a ceiling. We didn't want to get too much bigger. And so this recruiter's message just landed at the perfect time. And the company they were referring to was BetterUp, which was one of the fastest growing tech companies in the space for quite a long period of time. But at that time, they were Series B, relatively small. This is back in 2019. And so it took me a while and a long interview process that they have of tons of vetting to really come to the conclusion that I was going to take that risk. And it was because I felt so well supported in that role. And just, I think one of my superpowers is really I feel highly capable of doing things and getting things done.
Okay.
And so leveraging and leaning on a lot of that, I'm like, whatever happens here, I can figure it out. But really what I was drawn to was what they were doing as an organization, because it was incredibly blue ocean. It was very novel. And again, they were solving so much of the problems that I was trying to do in consulting, just in a totally new way.
So. Just in a nutshell, for anyone that's not heard of or not familiar with BetterUp as an organization, you mentioned this was one of the fastest growing startups in this space. What is that space? What do they do?
They really democratized coaching. So traditional executive coaching would be in person like you and I are today. It would probably cost you £600 to £800 an hour. But it's incredibly effective because it's hyper-personalized and tailored to the individual. And so they will shell out, thousands of dollars for normally executives to have this level of coaching. Right. But when you add technology and measurement into it, you can do it much more effectively at scale and a lot cheaper.
Yep.
But the real key there that got me was the measurement. So my whole degree was understanding how we can take the outcome we're trying to drive and connect the right vehicle to that, right?
Okay.
And BetterUp does this brilliantly through a real whole person model of understanding what does it take to thrive as, a leader, but also as an individual.
What year was this?
Back in 2019, very early 2019.
This is 2019. And you were just saying to us as well, you were employee number...
Oh gosh, like 87 or so? Yeah.
In terms of stepping into that startup space, albeit one that is on a very positive trajectory and seems to be doing all the right things, did you know much about what that encompassed and what that was going to bring?
No. Not at all.
Okay.
But this is again where I resourced myself very well. Yeah. So I leaned really heavily on everyone in my circle and everyone they knew in their circle. So
right.
I remember I got paired with a BDR, and our first meeting I could kind of tell that he was a bit disappointed that he got paired with me, who has zero sales experience. Was like this guinea pig experiment that the business was trying out. But it was probably meeting 4 where I was like, we can figure this out, right? Like, let's look at people with my background. They started to have budgets at that time and a seat at the table. And it was so fun to work with him because he had so much knowledge that I didn't have. And
as a salesperson in that organization.
As an SDR, BDR, and I didn't know how to work with them, right? I was really leaning on them for their expertise, where I think a lot of salespeople look at them as, glorified AEs sometimes, or like executive assistants in certain ways. Yeah. But I really worked closely with them and valued their experience. So learned a ton from this BDR. Jacob, as well as his dad, was one of the first AEs at Workday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he's like, you should talk to my dad. And so I grabbed him as a coach, and we had some amazing advisors and coaching available to us, and peers in my network too. So I leaned very heavily on my circle to help me and was not afraid of asking for help.
What was the role that you took out of interest, and what did that encompass?
Yeah, I was a senior AE.
Okay.
Senior having never done the role before. I'm still really rubbish at reports in Salesforce, but like you said, I could almost act as the solutions consultant, right, in a way. So I had the SME background already. Yeah. That helped quite a bit.
I'm curious to know, jumping into BetterUp, stepping in as a senior AE and learning some of those foundational things as a seller, as a salesperson. What do you remember about that? And I'm assuming some things must have been really daunting.
Yeah, I think what still surprises me is a bit of the roller coaster, right? Just how quickly things can change. You can have all this momentum on a specific deal or opportunity, and then it gets lost quickly. So there's a lot of the ups and downs there that I wasn't necessarily prepared for.
That's interesting, yeah.
My view of sales was the car salesman, right? Like you come in and you know what you want and you know you're going to leave the lot buying a car.
Yeah.
This is very different. So I wasn't necessarily prepared for some of the ups and downs or the no's there. What I took well to was really the solution itself and selling a solution to a problem versus a feature sell, right?
Yeah.
And so
one, presumably you buy into yourself. You know the value, having
absolutely
trained as a business psychologist. Like this stuff really will help you.
Spot on.
And so I'm assuming it wasn't something you had to learn the script to per se. This is something that you understand the value of and can convey perhaps in a way more naturally than your top seller who knows the process of selling but may not necessarily have that background. So that played probably really well into your own hands.
Yeah, it's a much more consultative sale, right?
Yes.
Especially with something that's pioneering blue ocean. You're selling to the first movers and the innovators, right? And so that's captivating and really fun.
Does your background as someone in business psychology help you in those scenarios? Did it help you with the adjustment to a sales role? And what advice do you have for people who are in a high-pressured sales role? Just with the day-to-day and how you cope in an environment like that?
I mean, this was a learning for me.
Yeah, okay.
So, yes, the psychology background helps, of course. I understand more about what motivates people and how they think and, the difference between like the masculine and the feminine and that intersection of things working together. Where I'd probably give advice is much more around the impact that how you show up has every day, and the importance of maintaining your own balance, especially while you have these roller coasters. And I think this is probably where you're getting with this. But, so much of my selling career has been selling solutions that do promote things like peak performance, well-being. As a high performer, being in sales is really tricky because it is black and white. And if you're not at the top of the leaderboard, that's hard. It's hard to come to terms with. And if you're not doing well for whatever reason, it can make you feel like you're not good enough. And that's not the case. Like we're all incredibly intelligent and worthy of success and are good enough. Sometimes it's just not. It's just how the cookie crumbles, right?
Certainly people who aren't in sales often think of the gong and the busy sales floor and all of these things. Is that reflective of a world that you've stepped into?
That has changed over the last, during my sales career, I guess. So since 2019, I was really molded and shaped by my first environment, which was an incredibly high-performing sales team. And as we got more funding and got more success, it was all about precision and peak performance, which in a way helped me grow and expand. But it was also during a period of life where personally I had kind of catapulted myself into hyper-independence. And so those two things in parallel were excellent and led to a lot of my success, but is hard to sustain without addressing some of the more personal side of things while trying to maintain that peak performance. Those came at odds at some point.
Of course.
Now, as a seller, I have embodied a lot more of my intuition and the psychology, if you will, into this process where it's, for me, less about kind of hunting, and now it's more about gathering in a really unique way. And so I think you think of sales as kind of this like really intense, aggressive, assertive way of being. And now I'm starting to lean more into how do we create more space for myself to understand the customer and their needs and provide a safe container for me to problem solve with them in. And that has led to such better conversations and really blooming of deals versus closing of deals. And so it's nice to see that shape change over the course of the years, but it took a year sabbatical and a lot of, like I said, inner work to get there.
I'm curious as well, when it comes to sales, do you think it helps if you're someone who's naturally competitive?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
I've tried to dial that down, though.
Okay.
I think it's good to have a naturally competitive environment, right? They say pressure builds diamonds. Yeah. But taking care of yourself is the number one priority. And so competitiveness can become nasty and it can become a bit of a double-edged sword in a certain way. So what I try to do is set goals that are much more focused on the customer or the end user. So how can I get this solution into as many people's hands to have life-changing experiences? Right? Versus being at the top of the leaderboard.
Yes.
So much more impact and outcomes focused versus where am I on the ranking system? Naturally, I've found when you focus on the former, the latter occurs on its own.
But where do you draw that line between being resilient in your role and taking all of this pressure and toughness and then putting your hand up and saying, actually, that's too much. I could do with some help. I need to take a step back. I could do with a sabbatical. Where's that line between be resilient, but also it's okay to ask for help?
This is where my psychology comes into play, right? Yeah.
This is the sweet spot.
But you're pointing out a really interesting misconception when we think about the word resilience. We always think of, the person getting punched and like standing back up again and again and again. But resilience is just as much about how you rest, restore, and renew as it is about how you persevere through hardship, right? Because you can't do one without the other. It's a bit of a chicken and egg. So the opportunity for me to work really hard or pull an all-nighter or, burn that midnight oil is because I have these boundaries in place around making sure that I'm sound, safe, well. And so it's not something you do once. It's not a big vacation that you take and you are fully restored and renewed. It is a consistent thing that I have built into my life now to make sure that when the opportunity calls and I need to, really put in that extra effort, the tank is full and I'm ready to do that.
Quick pause, because this links directly to what we've just been talking about. If you work in sales, a big part of your week is spent fixing data in your CRM that should already be right. And that's exactly why the best sales reps are using Surfe. It helps you find accurate emails and phone numbers, add contacts directly to your CRM, and add highly targeted lead lists without jumping between tools. You can sign up for free today and start prospecting immediately. So if your job is to sell, Surfe helps you do exactly that. That is something I think you can only presumably learn from overstepping in some places.
Yeah, there's been failures for sure.
Presumably you've been burnt and you've learned your limits
100%
to an extent. And do you think as a profession, sales has become more accepting of the importance of setting boundaries and more broadly mental health in the workplace?
I mentioned this earlier, right? We're finally catching up with what a lot of science knows. And it took us a pandemic to really shed the light on the importance of our people and how they show up in their physical and mental health and, so many other things. But I think now that we can measure the impact of HR strategies, that's really when it started to take off. HR has been burned so many times in the past because they were just seen as they file things and maybe put a couple programs into place or they launch a training and all we could figure out was did people like it and did they show up? Now, with the use of technology and AI and science, we can really put those together at an intersection where we can actually see and celebrate the impact of the work that we're doing. And so now HR has a seat at the table, and now we see HR moving into CEO roles, right? They are really the go-to folks because they know that human capital and that psychological capital is so important. So finally, I think we're here now. From a sales perspective, I think it's getting better. The UK does it much better than the US.
Okay, that's an interesting observation.
Yep. It's been an interesting transition because I worked for an American company when I moved here. And now I work for a UK company that also has offices in the US. And I mean, different leaders, different cultures, but I would say the European view and mentality and culture around workplace mental health is set up better. But look at the systems, right? You have the NHS in place and a lot more resources available to people, whereas in the US, this is pay out of your pocket, incredibly expensive resources to have.
Absolutely. And obviously you have relocated your life in coming from Chicago over to London.
Yes.
That must have been a huge junction in your life, naturally. What was the opportunity and what was on offer there?
Yeah, my time at BetterUp was incredible because I had grown in so many different ways and had a lot of opportunities. And the moment we were going to open up the European office, I was like, I volunteer as tribute. Send me. So I took that opportunity. There was a lot of vetting. They only hand selected like 10 people to go. But it was great because I was the only seller selected to come over. And we hired about 60 incredible people. One of the things that BetterUp does so well is hire just like outstanding talent. Wow. And I got to work alongside some of the smartest people that I've ever met and still get to call them friends, which is incredible. So we built a team here, mostly commercially minded. So other sellers as well as CS, pre and post sales, and solutions consultants. Wow. You mentioned earlier, where are points where maybe you've had failures in the system of resilience. This was one of them for me. Okay. I thought I could take my life in Chicago, just pick it up and move it here, and it would be pretty much the same. Man, was I wrong. It was right during Omicron, so it was like kind of one of those moments in COVID time where we had the opportunity to actually move and do things. Yeah. And then Omicron kind of hit, and man, did you take it seriously here? Everyone was getting jabs. And so I moved into a shoebox of temporary housing. It was dark. It was November time. I didn't realize how dark it would be here.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was just nonstop, like first meeting after demo, because we had the people here, but they didn't have the knowledge of the solution. Okay. Yeah, they were still ramping. So there was so much opportunity and excitement, but I was the only one who could actually, check the boxes and conduct these meetings. And so I remember, Thursday or Friday, I had like 13 back-to-back meetings, and it was just like, I don't even know who I'm talking to next, right? Wow. And so I definitely, it took a toll on me, and I should have asked for some more grace and space to adjust. And that caught up with me at some point. But again, great learning opportunity for me to think of, gosh, of course I would have been impacted by that. I just moved my whole life overseas.
Were you involved in some of the hiring of that great talent, or were you responsible for then just working with them when they came in? What was that relationship like?
A little bit of both. Mm-hmm. So as I grew and became more trusted by the organization, I was asked to be kind of what they would call a founder interviewer. Mm-hmm. And so that's really looking at the values of the individual, how that compares to the organization, and really the ad that could contribute. So I was involved in the hiring process for a lot of individuals who joined our team, not only here in the UK, but also in the US.
Are there certain things you look for in new hires in terms of a culture add to an organization, beyond the technical skill set, actually looking more so at the individual?
I'm always looking for, what can you teach me?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. In a nutshell.
Yes. Yeah. There's this constant state of learning that I think is insatiable in a lot of salespeople, and curiosity there. So I'm always looking for, what is your level of expertise? What's your superpower that you're going to bring to the table that I can learn from selfishly? So yeah, that's a skill set that I'm usually looking for, is like, where's your Swiss Army knife? Like, what's the sharpest tool that you have? And how will that contribute to what we currently have now? In addition to that, I would always say I'm looking for someone who understands that we are an outcomes-based, focused solution, right? Yes. So it's not about feature selling, right? I don't care the bells and whistles that are in the product. It's what's the outcome we are trying to drive, and attaching to that always. So is it, increased profits for the business? Is it higher engagement? Is it a reduction in behavioral healthcare costs? What is it that we're driving towards? And then working backwards from that. So that's evidence-based, really focused.
When you do have a new hire sat in front of you in that setting of an interview, what doesn't do it for you?
I would say so much of sales historically is, here's the path to the goal. Mm-hmm. When I started, and my background being so unique and non-commercial, my path to the goal looked very different. And so I am less concerned about how you arrive at the goal, as long as you're reaching the goal. I think there's so much beauty in that, because you get creative in how you get to that goal. And now with AI and all these like incredible tools that we have, why not? Yeah. Like, it doesn't have to be that rigid. If it's a cold call, or if it's a lunch, or, I don't care how you got to the goal, as long as you get to the goal.
So let's talk about the Unmind chapter. So Unmind is where you work currently. I'd love to know a bit more about them and the role you do there.
I was about 18 months into my time here with BetterUp on my secondment, and the business had changed, and they were restructuring. So I had the opportunity to take a slightly different role, or to take a step back. And BetterUp was very good to me. It allowed me to take about a year off of work. And so I took a sabbatical, which was my choice, and did a lot of deep learning, a lot of therapy, a lot of coaching, a lot of nurturing of myself and my relationships, and getting crystal clear on what I wanted next. But I also had a clock ticking and a visa that I needed to consider. And I was not interested in going back to the US. I really love being in Europe and 17-pound flights to Italy. So I knew I wanted to stay here, but I was, in a bit of a chicken and egg scenario with a visa. So I put my hat back in the ring around getting a job and worked for a company called Sapia AI for a short period of time. I would consider that a gap role. It was about 10 months, but I learned a tremendous amount about AI and what they were doing in that space, which I attribute to a lot of my success now. And just as much as you leave a bad leader, you also follow good ones. And the timing was perfect. I was not happy in my role at Sapia. And I remember so many times waking up in the morning, but my intuition kept telling me, just wait. And I was like, oh, this is just like killing me, this role. Like, why are you telling me to wait? And I know why now, because the phone rang and it was Laura, and she's like, hey, I'm moving. I've got this great gig. I want you to come work for me again.
What is it you like about selling enterprise as opposed to mid-market or SMB? Is there something in particular that you feel drawn to? And what is that?
It's harder. No.
Controversial take, but yes.
I always sold enterprise. I have sold smaller as well. And they're quicker and more nimble in certain ways, but I've also seen that at the enterprise level. But I think my skill set leans towards a more executive level conversation. And again, being outcomes driven versus process driven. So if I'm talking to someone who has to tick a box exercise, I'm talking to the wrong person. I'm here to solve big problems within the organization that impact things like the bottom line. And that is a C-level conversation usually.
Yeah. Presumably when you're selling and closing enterprise deals, you're working with large-scale organizations, multiple stakeholders, long sales cycles, dozens, and it just seems to get bigger, let alone internal politics and relationships that you have to build. How much of that comes back to psychology?
Quite a bit. I mean, you're dealing with so many different personalities. I would actually say it's a bit more project management than psychology, but those, come at an intersection together for themselves. But yeah, sometimes you're on a call with 20 to 30 people managing different stakeholders. But I think project management is more so.
Yes.
Yeah, where I lean once you're in the deal versus some of the psychology elements.
And I did notice you sometimes or have referred to yourself or the role as a trusted advisor rather than that of a seller. What's the difference?
Well, one is I can bring that credibility, right? I don't advise people going to get a PhD. It's very expensive, but I have that level, right, of credibility that I can bring to the table and understanding of the science and what we do. And so when I look at careers and companies that I consider working for, having that science arm of things is important because I want to make sure that we have the impact and measurement in place. And if I'm going to go ask for £6 million from someone, I better be able to show the impact and outcome of that, right?
Can you tell us about a deal that you are particularly proud of, one that was, a closed one, and you think, I worked hard on that, really hard on that?
Every seller has this, right?
Yep.
In their back pocket. And mine is not the big, flashy, glamorous one by any means. It was with OSF Healthcare, which is a nonprofit healthcare organization in the Midwest area of the States. It was a small deal, but to work with that team who are so mission driven in what they do, and to ask for money for something that is a not must have in many people's eyes, but a nice to have, you had to be that trusted advisor, right? It was about, okay, if your people are performing better, then that has an impact on patient outcomes, right? And so tying it all the way back to their mission was critical, but man, it took a lot of hoops for us to jump through to get there. And I remember sitting on site with them, and we all had masks on. This was COVID time. There's probably 40, 50 people in the room, and then others dialed in. I mean, this was everyone in their C-suite and the board to make this decision. And it was, 4 of us in the corner showing our solution and the outcome we could drive, and for them to be able to trust us with a pot of money that they don't get all the time was really, really meaningful. And I'm still very close with those people that I sold to and will never forget the trust that they had in me and the solution.
Interesting that you mentioned what might feel like a nice to have solution. Is that sort of baked in, that view?
Yeah, especially like a CFO or perhaps a CEO.
Yeah.
They can still look at HR as a nice to have or still a cost center in many, many ways. And so programs like training, development, well-being, right, can be looked at as something that isn't necessarily critical to the business.
Yeah.
But in reality, wellness is a spectrum, right? Mental health is not just how people may feel anxious or depressed. It's also how we experience joy and how we've laughed today, and should be a fundamental core aspect of people's experience, both personally and professionally. And so the fact that this falls sometimes underneath benefits or a nice to have is really unfortunate, because it should be just as important as your HRIS system or your computer that you need to work.
Absolutely. So I've asked you about, that deal that stands out to you for all the right reasons. Is there one that maybe got away?
Probably anyone I know that I've worked with listening to this knows exactly what I'm going to say. I had the privilege of working with the public sector when I moved here. So the UK Ministry of Defence has an incredible program where they transition veterans to civilian life. And that's a huge transition. I mean, we don't prepare. No. I don't know any country that's doing this well. It's really unfortunate. But this was a perfect opportunity for us to consider giving coaching to these individuals. And so I worked really closely with a few different incumbents who hold the contracts for these transition programs on how do we create something from the BetterUp lens that could fit into there, because BetterUp was so for the workforce, for the leader, It was really about, hey, we've got this recipe, we've got the ingredients, right, to like make this transition happen better. How do we frame it in a way that's slightly different than we're used to? And so I got to work really closely with our science and consulting team on building a solution that was unique to them. And man, it fit so well. Like it was just sexy and cool, and I was so excited to sell that. And we had to lay down the sword. It was just not a healthy deal for us. So to walk away from that was difficult to do, but it was the right thing to do, but is some of my best work because it challenged me to think differently about our solution and the possibilities there, and also humbled the hell out of me to go, this is not going to be good for us as a business. And so we have to put our efforts elsewhere.
So you talked about AI or mentioned AI not too long ago, and it's almost, I think like a bell for AI mentioned on here.
I thought you said no buzzwords.
No, that is so true. And I think there are some people that probably still feel that way about this, but I think this is a technology that is, well, it's changing almost every day, it feels like. There's a new solution that hits the market. There is a suggestion that AI is going to replace certain roles within sales. I'm just curious, with your experience, where's AI coming for your job? Is it coming for your job? Or can we all just relax ever so slightly about this?
I think AI allows me to have more relational intelligence. So it takes the things I don't like to do, right? Account research, put this into a slide, put this pricing together. That's not as fun. That's not the fun part of my role. The fun part of my role is sitting across from someone who's got a real problem and developing a solution to that and putting their name in lights, right? That is the fun part about my job. There are going to be people, as we evolve in this world, who would prefer to buy more transactionally, maybe online, not from a seller. I don't see that in my lifetime taking over, especially if I'm asking for £6 million, right? I think that's still going to be a very trusted advisor type of transaction.
Perhaps it's the nuance of enterprise, but it does feel like that is a space fundamentally where C-suite, senior stakeholders want that human, well, I would say relationship, but also someone, as a previous guest pointed out, to blame in the event that it doesn't work. Yeah,
I would agree. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I mean, I think about the involvement of like information security or data privacy, right? And these teams have put together these amazing trust portals and trust centers and all of the information you could possibly need. So when you sell a deal, right, their InfoSec team can go to that trust center, get what they need, but they don't often. they still want to hop on a call
Yeah.
and meet this data privacy person or infosec person. They want to know that you have this level of expertise in a human being
Yes.
on site.
Yes.
And all it takes is, and, you know, they're asking the questions. It's like, that's the first page of our trust portal, right? If you were to just log into it. But they want to know that there's a human responsible for these things. And yeah, I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon.
Team human seller in this perspective, in this world.
Selfishly for certain reasons. But yeah, no, I mean, if we were going to go have lunch, I would ask you for a recommendation around here, right? I would ask a person who knows the area, that's a trusted advisor to this space versus an AI, with maybe.
But perhaps to also be cautious about how much you use AI.
I've found that it's with voice where it can really change things. So talking to AI, you end up with deeper level conversations. This is things that we measure in our product now. The meaningfulness and emotive nature of using voice is much deeper than text. I'm curious to see what the workplace is going to be like when we're all just talking to AI versus typing to AI.
Yeah.
Are we all going to need our own offices again? Like, what's going to happen? But I have found that when I talk to AI, that can bleed into my human conversations sometimes.
My final question really for today on the podcast is one for the future. So we've heard so much today about what you've done prior, your move to the UK, the role that you're in currently. What does the sort of next 5 years look like for you, Angela? Or more broadly, what does the future hold? Do you have a glass ball that you've looked into?
I do. Yeah.
What would you like to maybe look forward to in your future?
I'm crystal clear on this. I've been doing a lot of soul searching over the last couple of years, and my heart belongs in fitness. So movement, particularly in some form of like Pilates, bar, yoga. So my goal in the next 5 years is to have a studio or some sort of retreat or a company based much more on fitness, which has been tugging at my heartstrings for quite some time. Wow. So that's where the future holds for me.
And that benefits both body and mind in many ways.
Seems like a far departure from where I'm at now, but
that's fantastic. Well, we are pretty much at time, Angela, here on Sales Rewritten. So hopefully this has felt a little bit like our own therapy session in some ways. Hopefully it's been as good for you as it has been for myself.
Likewise.
It's been a real privilege and a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. So that is it for today's episode of Sales Rewritten. A huge thank you, of course, to Angela for coming on and sharing her story all the way from the Midwest to here in London, where I dare say it maybe isn't as cold, but it's certainly dark and has been a little bit miserable at times. But spring has sprung here in the UK, and our episode, of course, will be coming to you on wherever you get your podcasts from, be it YouTube, Apple, or indeed Spotify. If you're finding us on one of those, do remember to give us a like and subscribe. And if you haven't already, find Angela on LinkedIn for more hot takes and everything you need to know. Thank you very much. And if you do want to spend more time selling, less time doing those admin, those medial tasks, looking for the right people in your role as a salesperson, then do check out surfe.com. I'm Alex Wood, your host. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Before you go, one last thing. This show is all about helping you sell better, and that starts with better prospecting. Surfe helps you find emails and phone numbers, keep your CRM up to date, and move leads into your workflows without admin getting in the way. You can start for free and use it immediately after this podcast, or upgrade to a paid plan when your team is ready to scale. If you want prospecting to take less time and deliver better results, Surfe is built exactly for that purpose. Visit surfe.com to sign up for free today and start prospecting immediately.